Hi, my name is Marquesha, and I'm going to be performing a poem for you guys called Christmas Tree. I want to pick one, a real one. I want to strap it to the top of the car, take it home. I want to pull out a box of decorations that's been in our family for generations. I want to help cook Christmas dinner. I want to leave milk and cookies out on Christmas Eve. I want to believe Santa Claus will bring presents. But see, we ain't got no Christmas tree. There's no room in a four-door unless you count the red and green car freshener hanging from the rearview mirror. No chimney either. I've grown accustomed to Christmas mission dinners. There's 10 people to a room. So before we go eat, they say, take anything precious with you. I grab my little brother in my arms, take my mom by the hand, place my other hand on my older brother's back, tell them one day we will have our home back. But how can I expect them to believe that when I don't? When it's been this way for 7 years, I've cried so many tears I could drown myself in my pillow. And believe me, I've tried to be a normal little girl. Once, I wrote a letter to Santa Claus, but I guess what it wrote was a normal little girl request. I said, Dear Santa, I want to pick one, a real Christmas tree. I want to strap it to the top of the car, take it home. I want to pull out a box of decorations that's been in our family for generations. I want to help cook Christmas dinner. I want to leave milk and cookies out on Christmas Eve. I want to believe. I want to garden. I want to plant seeds and grow things besides stereotypes. I want to celebrate my birthday in my backyard. I want to have a water balloon fight without all the restrictions. I want a friend, not a bunkmate, but a friend. But most of all, I want to be a kid again, only if you can, Santa, only if you can. But you'll have to give it to me personally because we still ain't got no Christmas tree.
Next up is our panel conversation with updates from the Homeless and Supportive Housing Advisory Task Force. That task force is led by the aforementioned Mayor Darrell Steinberg of Sacramento and our own Supervisor Mark Ridley-Thomas of Los Angeles.
Well, thank you, and thank you for that spoken word to kind of recenter us with the voice. Appreciate that a lot. I'm going to start with Supervisor Ridley-Thomas. I follow your Twitter account. You have many times mentioned that we need to treat this like an emergency and therefore approach it in that way, and we heard that earlier today from Gray Davis. Can you tell us how we would do that, combining state, federal, local, and dollars and actions to help end homelessness?
Well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to be here, and I want to give a shout out to Ms. Babers for that spoken word. I think we ought to give her another round of applause. She brought the real. And perhaps it should be said poetically, we have an introduction to why this is a state of emergency. What she was describing is a story that can be told by all too many people in this city, in this county, and therefore it seems to me that the public sector, joined by the private sectors, academic institutions, philanthropy, name them all, we should be joining together to punctuate the crisis that has enveloped our region. This is the epicenter of homelessness in the state of California, and it does seem to me that we do have a governor who is prepared to lead in the proper way on this. He's essentially said this is a state of emergency, issuing executive orders, signing in excess of 10 pieces of legislation in order to get at this in a coordinated, systemic way. I think to balk at the notion that this will cost too much is essentially to be resigned to the fact that homelessness is going to continue unabated. We have to come forth with imagination and the like. My co-chair, Darrell Steinberg, and I have led the governor's task force and come forth with what we describe as a comprehensive crisis response strategy, submitted to the governor, 40 points, and he has already begun to act. I suspect that he will talk with more specificity about that in his State of the State address in a matter of days now. And so I think that there are specific things that we can and should do. He's laid them out for us. He's talked about arresting, that is alleviating in a substantial way street homelessness, deepening mental health and substance use services, and accelerating the capacity to build housing with the kind of intensity that is fundamentally necessary in order for us to restore dignity to thousands, literally thousands of people throughout the state and throughout our cities. I think it is important to look at LA County and understand that the flexible dollars that we have in terms of addressing the crisis, to look at diversion as we have, and the like. Why? Because we have to break up the cycle between homelessness and incarceration. He's allocated resources for that and more. And so it seems to me there's a range of things that can and should happen that essentially constitute what is this crisis response strategy, AKA state of emergency response.
Thank you, Supervisor Thomas. Mayor Steinberg, you mentioned mandate earlier today, and in fact, the report calls it, and you may have also used these words, and I have to read them because it is a mouthful, a legally enforceable, results-based accountability mandate that is going to be essential in terms of moving us forward. And I think in the audience, people hear the word mandate, and it can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. We had the zero emissions mandate, zero emission vehicle mandate, didn't work so well. We had the regional housing needs assessment, maybe not a mandate, but something like that. And then you mentioned the success of the mandate around the elimination of fossil fuel. Tell us about this particular mandate and what it will do to end homelessness.
Yes, so let me try to break it down a little bit. And I know I spent a lot of time on the last panel I was on talking about this, and I want to make sure that we get to some other parts of the report. But what we are talking about is asking the state, in collaboration with local governments, to set aggressive but reasonable benchmarks over aggressive but reasonable periods of time to reduce their unsheltered homeless population, and to be held accountable for a failure to demonstrate good faith or make progress towards those imperatives. We don't want there to be a bunch of lawsuits, but we call for the potential of an inspector general to be able to go to court, just like the federal courts did in the desegregation era, and require, not punish cities or counties or the state, but to require compliance with whatever it takes to meet the benchmark. If it's citing sufficient amount of land to be able to build the navigation centers and the housing, if it is getting your money out the door in 60 days instead of 6 or 9 months, if it is joining your resources with your jurisdictional neighbor to create a regional strategy where there isn't a drive towards getting people off the street and saving lives, we call for a mandate and accountability and a reasonable enforcement mechanism to get there. Now, let me tell you what the mandate is not, or what is not intended. If we come to the conclusion, there's a lot of money out there. In Los Angeles, you got the H and Triple H, you got the Mental Health Services Act, you've got federal and state Medicaid dollars, a lot of money, maybe not enough. If we determine that we have enough money currently to only get 50% of the people off the streets, then the mandate should be that you only have to get 50% of the people off the streets. If we want to go higher than that, then there needs to be more money. So the concern has been, and the feedback has been, oh, hold on a minute. You're going to impose a mandate on local governments. You're not going to pay for it, and you're going to hold them accountable to an unreasonable standard. That isn't the case. The accountability should be commensurate with the resources, but really, is the money getting out as fast as it should get out? Is it getting out with as much collaborative spirit among jurisdictions as it should? Are we citing the facilities as quickly as we should? No. So, you know my political lineage here. I'm always for more money to solve the problem. But you know what? It's not just about money here. And if all we do is ask for more money and not match it with accountability, then we're not driving towards the result that we all insist on seeing, and more importantly, the results that the people insist on seeing.
Thank you for clarifying that, Mayor Steinberg. I know we don't have a lot of time, and this session is called Updates from the State Commission. So I'd love for each one of you to kind of conclude by maybe uplifting one of the 40 that hasn't gotten the proper attention that will move us toward a comprehensive solution to ending homelessness.
Well, I'm pleased that the governor did issue an executive order that said that the 100 trailers that were originally intended for the use in terms of the wildfires will be released for the purposes of housing those who are yet homeless. 30 of which are moving toward and have moved toward Los Angeles County, and 20 of those 30 will be in the city of Los Angeles at Manchester and Broadway and Exposition and Crenshaw. Councilmember Herb Wesson and I are collaborating on the latter. Councilmember Corinne Price and I are collaborating on the former. That was done less than 30 days ago, the order to move them. The city council moved with speed. The board of supervisors moved with more speed and effectively has caused 10 families to be eligible to be cited for those parcels, publicly owned parcels. And this is what has to happen. We need to move quickly. There will be community engagement and beautification of those environments, and I can tell you, 10 families on Broadway, 10 families on Crenshaw, new families will have housing on the track to permanent supportive housing in less than 30 days. We need action in real time, no excuses, no complaining about what we don't have, but essentially to gather up our resources with philanthropy, nonprofits, and the public sector, as well as the real estate community, step forward to make these 2 projects come to fruition. I can tell you, it will be a model that is worthy of replication.
Thank you. Thank you, Supervisor Ridley-Thomas.
Agree with what he said. So here's an issue that isn't getting enough attention. Let's stipulate that the answer to the housing crisis is more housing supply. Right on. But let's also be honest about the math. We are never going to meet the volume of housing need so long as the average subsidy to build a single unit of permanent supportive housing or affordable housing in California ranges between $300,000 and $400,000 per unit to $600,000 and $700,000 per unit. It's not happening. It'll be great for the people who get the nice apartments, but what about everybody else? It is time for a Silicon Valley moment around efficiency housing in California. All of these, I have seen more great prototypes, manufactured housing, stacked units, cargo units, tiny homes, by the way, all with, all safe, all insulated, all with electricity and plumbing, all with dignity, but smaller, easier to build, less expensive to build, and faster to build. And guess what? Even though I know LA's doing a lot here, so I'm not ignoring the great things that are going on, but none of these products have gone to scale. None of them. Why not? We invented the darn microchip in the Silicon Valley. Why aren't we inventing and bringing to scale massive amounts of quality housing that maybe is 300 or 400 square feet for the homeless, for the students, for people who want to live in a cool place that just isn't as large? This is a failure of imagination, and we're not using our public dollars sufficiently to incentivize the creation of this new market and set of markets in California, and we must, because we will never build enough housing in this conventional way that we know. Last statistic, the Bay Area Council put out a study, and it's similar here, I'm sure, that if we continue to rely on the only way we know to build affordable housing, it will take until 2037 to get the last homeless person in the Bay Area off the streets. Really? How about some, as Governor Davis, Governor Schwarzenegger, and Secretary Carson talked about, how about some common sense here? And let's start creating some new markets.
How about some action?
Yes, so please join me in thanking both Supervisor Thomas and Mayor Steinberg for joining us.